My name is Linda, and I'm 56 years old. 2 weeks ago, my daughter Jessica threw me what she called a birthday party. There were professional photographers, videographers, and even a script she wanted me to follow. The decorations were perfect. The guest list was carefully curated, and every moment was choreographed like a Hollywood production. But here's the thing that kept nagging at me throughout that entire evening. My birthday is in March. This party happened in August. When I finally discovered the real reason behind this elaborate charade, I walked away from my own fake birthday party and never looked back. Before we dive into this story, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop a comment and let me know your city or state. If this story resonates with you, please hit that like button and don't forget to subscribe for more real-life experiences. Trust me, what I'm about to share will make you question everything you thought you knew about family loyalty and the lengths some people will go for their own agenda. Let me paint you a picture of who I am and where this all began. I've lived in Columbus, Ohio for the better part of 30 years. I was married to my wonderful husband Robert for 28 years before cancer took him from me 8 years ago. We raised 2 children together. Jessica, who's now 32, works as a marketing executive in New York City, and my son Michael, 29, is an engineer living out in California. For 3 decades, I taught 2nd grade at Riverside Elementary School. I loved those kids like they were my own, watching them grow and learn, seeing their faces light up when something finally clicked. I took early retirement 5 years before Robert passed away so I could care for him during his illness. Those were some of the hardest months of my life, but I wouldn't trade that time we had together for anything. After Robert died, the house felt enormous and empty. Jessica and Michael both had their own lives, careers that demanded their attention. I understood that I really did, but the phone calls became fewer, the visits even more rare. Jessica especially seemed to retreat into her work. She'd always been a perfectionist, even as a little girl. Her school projects had to be flawless, her room organized to the point of obsession. If something wasn't exactly right, she'd start over from scratch. When she moved to New York for her marketing job, that perfectionist streak intensified. Our conversations became formal, almost businesslike. She'd call on major holidays, ask about my health, tell me briefly about some work project, and then we'd hang up. It felt like she was checking items off a to-do list. Call mom, check. Duty fulfilled. Our values had always been different. I found joy in simple things. A good book coffee with neighbors working in my small garden behind the house. Jessica seemed consumed with appearances, with metrics of success I didn't understand. She was always talking about her LinkedIn connections, her Instagram engagement, her personal brand. I didn't even know what a personal brand was supposed to be. Michael, on the other hand, stayed closer to our family's roots. He called regularly, sent funny memes, remembered stories from when he was little, but he was busy with his engineering projects and his girlfriend Sarah. I never wanted to be the needy mother who demanded too much attention from her adult children. Then, out of nowhere, 2 weeks before this mysterious party, Jessica called me on a Tuesday evening. Her voice was different, bubbling with an enthusiasm I hadn't heard in years. "Mom, I have the most wonderful idea," she said. "I want to throw you a surprise birthday party." I was quiet for a moment, confused. "Honey, you know my birthday is in March, right? It's August now." "Oh, Mom!" She laughed, and I could practically hear her waving her hand dismissively. "Let's celebrate life any time we want to. You deserve to be celebrated more than once a year." Something in her tone made me pause, but I pushed that feeling aside. Maybe she was finally ready to reconnect, to rebuild the relationship that had grown so distant since her father's death. Maybe this was her way of reaching out, of trying to bridge the gap that had formed between us. That's very sweet of you, Jessica, I said. But you don't need to go to any trouble. It's no trouble at all, Mom. I want to do this. I need to do this. The way she said need stuck with me, but I chose to interpret it as love, as a daughter's desire to show appreciation for her mother. Looking back now, I realize that was the first red flag I should have paid attention to. Over the next 2 weeks, Jessica threw herself into planning this party with an intensity that honestly worried me. She called me every day with updates, questions, and increasingly specific requirements that seemed strange for what I thought would be a casual gathering. First, she hired professionals. Not just any professionals, but people she'd researched extensively. Brandon, a photographer who specialized in what Jessica called lifestyle and family content, and Samantha, a videographer who had apparently worked on some commercial projects in New York. When I asked why we needed both a photographer and someone filming, Jessica insisted that these moments needed to be properly captured. "Mom, these are precious memories," she explained. "We want to make sure everything is documented beautifully." She booked a private dining room at Marchand's, an upscale restaurant downtown that I'd never even stepped foot in. The kind of place where they charge $25 for a salad, and the waiters wear bow ties. When I suggested we could just have a simple gathering at my house, maybe order some pizza and invite a few neighbors, Jessica was horrified. "This needs to be special, Mom. You deserve the absolute best." Then came the wardrobe requirements. Jessica shipped an elegant navy blue dress to my house, along with specific instructions about shoes, jewelry, and even which purse I should carry. The dress was beautiful. I'll give her that, but it was also expensive and formal in a way that made me feel like I was wearing a costume. "I want you to feel gorgeous," Jessica said when I called to thank her. "Trust me on this, Mom. The navy blue will look stunning in photos." Photos again. Everything seemed to revolve around how things would look in photos. She sent formal invitations to my neighbors and friends, people I hadn't expected would even know about the party, Mrs. Henderson from across the street called me confused about the timing, but touched to be included. My friend Carol from the library was excited, but also puzzled. "Honey," Carol said, "I thought your birthday was in spring." "It is," I admitted. "This is just Jessica wanting to celebrate." But the strangest requirement was the script. Jessica sent me a 3-page document outlining what she wanted me to say during various parts of the evening. There was a gratitude speech where I was supposed to talk about how blessed I felt to have such a thoughtful daughter. There were specific reactions she wanted me to have when I walked into the room, when I saw the decorations, when she presented me with gifts. "I just want to make sure we capture your authentic emotions," she explained. "Sometimes when people are overwhelmed, they forget to express what they're really feeling." I practiced these lines in my living room, feeling ridiculous, but wanting to make Jessica happy. I told myself this was just her way of making sure everything went smoothly, that maybe this level of planning was normal for people her age. But then I realized she hadn't invited Michael. When I asked about my son, Jessica got vague. "He's just so busy with work, Mom. You know how demanding his schedule is. I didn't want to burden him with traveling." That evening I called Michael myself. "Honey, are you really too busy to come to this party Jessica is planning?" There was silence on the other end of the line. "What party, Mom?" "The birthday party. This Saturday." "Mom," Michael said slowly, "isn't your birthday in March?" My stomach dropped. That's what I thought too, but Jessica says she wants to celebrate anyway. "She never mentioned any party to me," Michael said, and I could hear the confusion and hurt in his voice. "When did she start planning this?" After I hung up with Michael, I sat in my kitchen staring at the script Jessica had sent me. Something was wrong. Very wrong. But I couldn't put my finger on exactly what it was, and part of me was afraid to look too closely at my growing suspicions. Jessica called that evening to go over the timeline one more time. She wanted me to arrive at exactly 6 o'clock. Not 5:55, not 6:05. 6 o'clock precisely because the lighting would be perfect then. She wanted me to park in a specific spot so the photographers could capture my arrival reaction. And Mom, she added, if any of the reactions don't feel natural the first time, we might need to do a few takes. You know how these things work. Actually, I didn't know how these things worked. Because in my world, birthday parties happened once in real time with real emotions and real spontaneous moments. The fact that Jessica was talking about takes made my skin crawl, but I pushed that feeling down and promised myself I'd make this work for her sake. The morning of the party, Jessica arrived at my house at 7 a.m. with an entourage that transformed my quiet living room into what looked like a movie set. She brought a makeup artist named Trisha, who spent an hour working on my face, applying more makeup than I'd worn in the past 5 years combined. There was a hairstylist who teased and sprayed my hair into a style I didn't recognize when I looked in the mirror. Jessica had also brought lighting equipment. Ring lights, she called them, along with reflectors and extension cords that snaked across my hardwood floors. She directed the setup like a seasoned producer, adjusting angles and testing different brightness levels. "We want you to look absolutely radiant, Mom," she kept saying, but she wasn't looking at me when she said it. She was looking at her phone at the ring light's effect on the camera screen. For 2 hours we practiced. Jessica coached me on exactly how to react when I walked into the restaurant, how to hold my face when I saw the decorations, where to look when she gave her speech about me. She made me practice my surprised expression over and over again. "It needs to look natural, Mom, but also really expressive. The camera needs to catch your genuine emotion." I felt like a trained seal performing tricks for treats. But I told myself this was what Jessica needed, that maybe this was how her generation showed love, through perfect execution and beautiful documentation. During our rehearsal, I noticed Jessica had invited people I barely knew. There were 3 of her work colleagues who had flown in from New York. Why would they come to a birthday party for someone they'd never met? My actual close friends like Carol and my neighbor Mrs. Patterson were there, but they seemed outnumbered by strangers. "I wanted you to meet some of the important people in my life," Jessica explained when I asked. "They've heard so much about you." But when had Jessica talked about me to her colleagues? In our brief formal phone calls, she rarely shared personal details about our relationship. At the restaurant, the level of preparation was unlike anything I'd ever seen for a family gathering. Brandon and Samantha had arrived hours early to set up multiple cameras at different angles. The private dining room was decorated with fresh flower arrangements that must have cost hundreds of dollars, professional lighting that made everything look like a magazine photo, and banners that said, "Happy Birthday, Linda," in elegant script. The restaurant staff moved around us like we were filming a commercial, which in hindsight, I suppose we were. Jessica had coordinated every detail down to the minute. She told me where to sit, which direction to face, how to hold my hands when I opened gifts. She reminded me about the speech I was supposed to give about hitting specific emotional beats that would really resonate with people. "What people?" I asked. "Oh, you know, everyone who cares about you," she said vaguely, but her eyes were on Brandon, making sure he was getting the right shots. As guests began arriving, I noticed how Jessica greeted her work colleagues with the kind of warm familiarity she hadn't shown me in years. She hugged them, laughed at their jokes, asked about their projects with genuine interest. Meanwhile, she barely made eye contact with me unless a camera was pointed in our direction. The party began exactly at 6 o'clock, just as Jessica had planned. I walked through my scripted entrance, delivered my practice surprised reaction, and took my designated seat. Everyone applauded on cue, and Brandon captured every moment from multiple angles. But as I looked around the table watching Jessica direct conversations and remind people to speak loudly enough for the microphones to pick up, a cold realization began settling in my stomach. This wasn't a birthday party. This was a performance, and I was the unwilling star of a show I didn't understand. The breaking point came during what was supposed to be a bathroom break. I excused myself and walked toward the restroom, grateful for a few minutes away from the cameras and the artificial cheerfulness. But as I approached the ladies' room, I heard Jessica's voice coming from around the corner near the restaurant's back office area. She was talking to Brandon, and her tone was completely different from the loving daughter act she'd been putting on all evening. "We definitely need to get more emotion in the next segment," she was saying. "The birthday content always performs well, especially when it's authentic family stuff. My engagement has been down this quarter, and I need these numbers for the brand partnership proposals." I stopped walking, pressing myself against the wall to listen. "The lighting on her face during the speech was perfect," Brandon replied. "Very flattering for the demographic you're targeting. The whole aging parent angle is really trending right now." "Exactly," Jessica said. "I've been researching this for months. Family content, especially intergenerational stuff, gets incredible reach. And the emotional component, surprising your mom, showing gratitude, all of that tests really well with brands looking for authentic influencer partnerships." My blood turned to ice water. "How many posts are you planning from tonight?" Brandon asked. "I'm thinking a whole series. Maybe 8 to 10 posts across Instagram and TikTok, plus the longer-form video content for YouTube. I hired a social media strategist to map out the optimal release schedule. We want to milk this for at least 2 months of content." Milk this. That's how my daughter referred to what I thought was a loving gesture from a child to her mother. I stood there frozen as Jessica continued outlining her content calendar like she was discussing a marketing campaign for laundry detergent. Because that's exactly what this was. When I finally returned to the dining room, I saw everything differently. The careful staging, the professional equipment, the way Jessica kept checking her phone and adjusting camera angles. The strangers at the table weren't friends wanting to meet her mother. They were witnesses' props to make the content look more authentic and well-attended. I watched Jessica pose for selfies with me, making sure to get my good side, and coaching me to smile a little more naturally. She posted them in real time, and I could see the comments starting to pour in from people who didn't know me, didn't know us, responding to the carefully crafted image of a devoted daughter surprising her grateful mother. "Jessica," I said quietly, leaning toward her. "Can I speak with you privately for a moment?" "Oh, Mom, can it wait? We're right in the middle of the gift opening segment, and the lighting is perfect right now." Segment. She called it a segment. "Jessica, I need to speak with you now." Something in my tone must have gotten through to her because she finally looked at me. Really looked at me for the first time all evening. What she saw in my face made her smile falter. "Of course, Mom. Brandon, can you get some shots of the table while we step away?" We walked to a quiet corner of the restaurant, away from the cameras and the guests who were chatting among themselves, probably wondering why the birthday girl looked like she'd seen a ghost. "I heard your conversation with the photographer," I said simply. Jessica's face went through a series of expressions. Confusion, then recognition, then panic, then a forced smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Mom, I don't know what you think you heard, but I heard you talking about engagement numbers and brand partnerships. I heard you call this content and talk about milking it for 2 months of posts. Jessica's forced smile crumbled. For a moment, she looked like the little girl who used to come to me when she'd broken something, hoping she could charm her way out of trouble. Mom, okay, yes, I do share parts of my life on social media. That's normal now, but that doesn't mean I don't genuinely want to celebrate you. This isn't my birthday, Jessica. I know, but you hired professionals to film this. You wrote me a script. You invited your work colleagues instead of my close friends. You've been posting about this in real time. I could feel my voice getting stronger, more clear. This isn't about celebrating me. This is about using me. Jessica looked around nervously, probably worried that someone might overhear us. Mom, please keep your voice down. We can talk about this later, but right now we have all these people here and the footage isn't complete. The footage isn't complete. I repeated her words slowly. Do you hear yourself, Jessica? Do you hear how you're talking about your own mother? Tears started forming in Jessica's eyes, but I couldn't tell if they were genuine or just another performance. Mom, you're overreacting, so what if I share our special moments? People love seeing real family connections. There's nothing wrong with that. There's everything wrong with staging fake moments for strangers on the internet. There's everything wrong with turning your mother into content without her consent. There's everything wrong with lying to me about why we're here. I didn't lie, Jessica protested, but her voice was weak. You absolutely did lie. You told me this was about celebrating me, about wanting to reconnect. But this is about your career. I'm not your mother right now. I'm a prop in your personal branding strategy. The words hung between us like a physical barrier. Jessica opened her mouth to argue, then closed it again. In that moment, I think she finally realized how far she'd crossed the line. But instead of apologizing, instead of acknowledging what she'd done, she doubled down. Mom, this is how the world works now. Everything is digital. Sharing our lives, building connections, creating content that's just normal. You're being old-fashioned about this. That's when I knew with absolute clarity what I had to do. I walked back to the table where 20-some people were waiting for the birthday girl to return so they could continue with the performance. Brandon had been taking candid shots of the guests, and Samantha was adjusting her video equipment for whatever segment came next in Jessica's content plan. Everyone, I said, standing at the head of the table. I need to tell you all something important. Jessica rushed up beside me, panic written across her face. Mom, maybe we should. My birthday is in March, I said clearly, loud enough for everyone to hear. This party is not a birthday celebration. My daughter organized this event to create content for her social media accounts and to build her personal brand for potential business partnerships. The table went dead silent. I could see the confusion on the faces of my real friends, the embarrassment on the faces of Jessica's colleagues who were suddenly realizing they'd been unknowing participants in a deception. I was given a script to follow and asked to perform emotions that weren't genuine. I was told we might need to do multiple takes if my reactions weren't satisfactory for the cameras. Jessica grabbed my arm. Mom, please, you're ruining everything. These people came here for you. No, Jessica. They came here for your content, and I will not be anyone's content anymore. I turned to address the group again. I want to thank those of you who came here because you genuinely care about me. I'm sorry you were deceived about the nature of this event. I'm going home now. Brandon was still holding his camera, looking uncertain about whether he should be documenting this moment. I looked directly at him. You do not have my permission to use any photographs or video of me from tonight for any purpose. If any images of me appear on social media or anywhere else, I will take legal action. Jessica was crying now, real tears this time. "Mom, you're embarrassing me in front of my colleagues. Can't we please just finish the evening and talk about this later?" "I've been embarrassed for weeks, Jessica, every time I practiced those fake reactions you wanted. Every time I rehearsed gratitude I didn't feel. Every time I pretended this was normal." My neighbor, Mrs. Henderson, stood up from the table. "Linda, would you like me to drive you home?" "Thank you, but I drove myself." Carol from the library also stood. "I'm going with you." One by one, my real friends began gathering their purses and saying goodbye. Jessica's work colleagues sat frozen, unsure of the etiquette for this situation. I'm sure they'd never seen an influencer event implode in real time. As I walked toward the exit, Jessica followed me, still pleading. "Mom, I'm sorry. Okay, I should have told you about the social media aspect, but that doesn't mean I don't love you. That doesn't mean this wasn't also about celebrating you." I stopped and turned to face her one last time. "Jessica, if you loved me, you would have asked for my permission. If you loved me, you would have invited Michael. If you loved me, my comfort and dignity would have mattered more than your engagement numbers. What am I supposed to tell these people? What am I supposed to do with all this footage?" Even in her apology, she was still thinking about the content about salvaging something for her social media strategy. "Tell them the truth," I said. "Tell them you used your mother without her consent, and she refused to participate in your lie." I walked out of that restaurant with my head held high for the first time in months. Behind me, I could hear Jessica trying to do damage control, probably spinning some story about her mother having an emotional episode. But I didn't care anymore what story she told. I was done being a character in anyone else's narrative. The aftermath of that evening rippled through our family and my community in ways I hadn't expected. Within hours, Michael called me from California, having heard about the incident from one of Jessica's colleagues who felt compelled to reach out to him. "Mom, I'm so sorry," he said, and I could hear the anger in his voice. "I can't believe she would do that to you. I'm proud of you for walking away." Over the next few days, some of the guests from the party contacted me. Mrs. Henderson brought over a homemade casserole and wanted to make sure I was okay. Carol invited me for coffee and told me she'd suspected something was off about the whole event, but hadn't wanted to say anything. "The way that girl was directing everyone around like we were actors," Carol said, shaking her head. "I've never seen anything like it." Jessica's social media accounts, which I'd never followed but decided to investigate, told their own story. She'd already posted several photos from the early part of the evening with captions about surprising my amazing mom and grateful for family moments. The comments were full of heart emojis and praise for being such a thoughtful daughter, but she'd obviously struggled with how to handle the footage from after I left. A few days later, she posted a vague story about family misunderstandings and learning to respect boundaries. But it was clear her content strategy had been derailed. Jessica tried to reach out multiple times. Phone calls that I didn't answer, text messages apologizing and asking if we could talk, flower deliveries with cards saying she missed me and wanted to make things right. But her messages revealed that she still didn't fully understand what she'd done wrong. She apologized for not telling me about the social media component, as if that had been the only problem. She said she'd learned her lesson about including me in her content planning process, going forward as if the issue was a lack of communication rather than a fundamental violation of trust and dignity. Extended family members began taking sides. My sister Ruth called to tell me that Jessica had reached out to her claiming I'd had some kind of breakdown and asking if Ruth thought I might need medical attention. When Ruth told her that walking away from exploitation wasn't a sign of mental illness, Jessica apparently got defensive and accused the family of ganging up on her. My brother Tom, who lives in Florida, called to offer support, but also to play devil's advocate. "Maybe she just got caught up in this social media stuff," he suggested. "Young people do things differently now." "Tom," I said, "would you want your daughter to hire photographers to film you without your knowledge so she could use the footage to build her personal brand?" He was quiet for a moment. "When you put it like that, no. Definitely not." The community response surprised me. I'd expected some people to think I'd overreacted, but instead I found support from unexpected places. My mail carrier mentioned that his daughter was always trying to get him to appear in her videos. The librarian where I volunteer told me about feeling pressured to participate in her grandson's YouTube channel. It seemed like my experience had touched on something larger, something many people were struggling with in this new digital world, where privacy and consent had become complicated concepts. I started seeing a counselor, Dr. Martinez, to help me process not just the betrayal from Jessica, but also the years of enabling behavior that had led up to this moment. Through our sessions, I began to recognize patterns I'd ignored, ways I'd prioritized keeping peace over maintaining boundaries. "You taught your daughter that your comfort and dignity were negotiable," Dr. Martinez observed during one session. "She learned that if she wanted something from you, she just had to push a little harder until you gave in." It was a painful realization, but also a liberating one. I began to see how I could change these patterns, how I could rebuild our relationship on healthier terms. I wrote Jessica a letter not sent through text or email, but written by hand and mailed to her apartment in New York. In it, I outlined my conditions for moving forward. Honest communication, respect for my privacy, genuine connection rather than transactional interactions. I told her I loved her, but that love couldn't exist in a relationship built on exploitation. I also told her that any future relationship would need to include Michael as an equal participant. The way she'd excluded him from this event revealed her willingness to manipulate family dynamics for her own benefit, and that couldn't continue. For weeks, I heard nothing back. Then just before Thanksgiving, Jessica called. "Mom," she said, and her voice sounded different. Smaller. More like the little girl I remembered. "I got your letter. I've been thinking about it for weeks. I think I need help." The healing process was slow and sometimes frustrating, but gradually something real began to emerge from the wreckage of our fake birthday party. Jessica started therapy with a counselor in New York who specialized in social media addiction and the psychological impact of living life as performance. My real birthday in March became a turning point. Instead of Jessica planning some elaborate production, my genuine friends organized a small gathering at my house. Carol brought her famous chocolate cake, Mrs. Henderson contributed her homemade bread, and we spent the afternoon playing cards and sharing stories. Michael flew in from California, and for the first time in years, it felt like we were just a family enjoying each other's company without any agenda beyond being together. No cameras, no scripts, no performance requirements. Jessica asked if she could attend, and after some discussion with Dr. Martinez and a lot of internal debate, I agreed. But I set clear boundaries. No phones at the table during dinner. No posting about the event without explicit permission from everyone involved. No staging or directing of conversations. When she arrived, Jessica looked nervous in a way I hadn't seen since she was a teenager. She brought a simple gift, a framed photo of her and me, from when she was about 10 years old, before social media existed, before everything became about documentation and optimization. I found this in my old room at Dad's house. she said quietly. I remember that day. We were just baking cookies and being silly. No one was taking pictures for any reason except that we wanted to remember the moment. During dinner, Jessica mostly listened. She asked Michael about his work, not because she needed content, but because she'd realized she didn't actually know much about her brother's life. She asked me about my volunteer work at the library, about my book club, about the small daily joys I'd been experiencing while we weren't speaking. It wasn't perfect. There were moments when I could see her instinctively reaching for her phone when she started to comment on how nice something would look in a photo, catching herself mid-sentence. Breaking the habits of constant documentation and performance was clearly going to be a long process. But there were also moments of genuine connection that reminded me why I'd loved being her mother before everything got so complicated. When she laughed at one of Michael's terrible jokes, when she helped me clear the dishes without being asked, when she shared a story from her childhood that I'd forgotten. After everyone left that evening, I sat in my quiet house and realized something profound had shifted. For the first time in years, I felt like I'd spent an evening with my actual daughter, rather than with the polished, strategic version of herself she'd been presenting to the world. The rebuilding of our relationship continued slowly over the following months. Jessica made genuine efforts to change her approach to social media and to life in general. She began posting less frequently and more authentically. She stopped trying to turn every experience into content and started actually experiencing moments for their own sake. She also began reaching out to old friends she'd lost touch with, people who knew her before she became obsessed with building her personal brand. She started dating someone who wasn't on social media at all, a teacher named David, who was more interested in grading papers than growing his follower count. Our phone conversations became longer and more substantive. Instead of brief check-ins focused on logistics, we talked about books we were reading, movies we'd enjoyed, concerns we had about the world. Jessica started asking for my advice about things that mattered to her, not because she needed content about wisdom from Mom, but because she valued my perspective. But perhaps the most meaningful change was how Jessica began relating to other people in her life. She stopped viewing relationships as networking opportunities or content sources. She started volunteering at a literacy program in her neighborhood work that she specifically chose not to publicize or document. I needed to remember what it felt like to do something good without performing the goodness for an audience, she told me during one of our calls. When her birthday came around in September, I asked what she wanted to do to celebrate. Her answer surprised me. I think I want to take you to dinner, just us, somewhere quiet where we can talk. No photos, no posts, no documentation. Just a mother and daughter having a meal together. We went to a small Italian restaurant near my house, the kind of place where the owner knows your name and asks about your family. We talked for 3 hours about everything and nothing. Jessica told me about her struggles with anxiety, about the pressure she'd felt to constantly prove her worth through metrics and engagement. I shared my own fears about aging, about loneliness, about losing touch with the people I loved. For the first time in years, I felt like I was sitting across from my real daughter, not the curated version she'd been presenting to the world. And she seemed to see me as a real person too, not just as a supporting character in her personal narrative. The experience taught me that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is refuse to enable their unhealthy behavior, even when that refusal causes immediate pain. By walking away from that fake birthday party, I forced Jessica to confront the ways she'd been using the people she claimed to love. It was the wake-up call she needed, even though neither of us realized it at the time. I also learned that authenticity requires courage. It's easier to go along with someone else's script to perform the emotions they want you to feel, to prioritize their comfort over your own dignity. But real relationships can't exist in that kind of artificial environment. They need space for genuine emotion, for spontaneous moments, for the messy, unpredictable reality of human connection. Now, when I look back on that awful evening at the restaurant, I feel grateful for the clarity it gave me. It showed me the difference between being loved and being used, between genuine celebration and manufactured content. It taught me that my comfort and dignity aren't negotiable, not even for family members who claim their intentions are good. Most importantly, it taught me that walking away from toxic situations, even family ones, isn't giving up on love. Sometimes it's the only way to create space for real love to grow. Sometimes you have to end the lie before you can begin to live the truth. Today, Jessica and I have a relationship built on honesty, respect, and genuine care for each other's well-being. It's not perfect, and we're still working through years of patterns that prioritized performance over presence. But it's real in a way our relationship hadn't been for a very long time. And my actual birthday celebrations now are exactly what they should be. Simple gatherings with people who love me for who I am not, for how I might benefit their personal brand. Moments of genuine joy and gratitude that don't need to be documented or optimized or shared with strangers for validation. Sometimes the best gift you can give yourself is the courage to walk away from situations that diminish your worth, even when walking away feels impossible. Sometimes preserving your dignity is the most loving thing you can do, both for yourself and for the people who need to learn how to treat you better. Life is too precious to spend performing for other people's benefit. True celebration comes from genuine connections and authentic moments, not from orchestrated events designed to impress an audience that doesn't really know you. And at 56 years old, I finally learned that my real birthday happens every day I choose to live authentically, surrounded by people who love me exactly as I am. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where a family member put their needs ahead of your comfort and dignity? How did you handle it? And what did you learn about setting boundaries with the people closest to you? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please give it a like and share it with someone who might need to hear about the importance of standing up for themselves, even in difficult family situations. Don't forget to subscribe for more real-life stories about navigating relationships, setting boundaries, and finding the courage to choose authenticity over performance. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that you deserve relationships built on genuine love and respect, not on what you can provide for someone else's agenda. Here's to celebrating life authentically, surrounded by people who value you for exactly who you are.